oldest William Shakespeare wrote. What is past is prologue. So, here is mine. My journey with Shakespeare started when I was 6 years old. As an unexpected gift and blessing, I had received a children's edition of Shakespeare's most famous plays. I loved that collection and reread it often. When I was old enough to understand that I had a children's edition, I gave the plays a try. I didn't understand. The language scared me. Many years later, when English literature replaced reading time as a lesson, I reignited my love for Shakespeare. Reading all the way from Russia, I truly understood why the bard is no longer just an English writer, but a global writer. I never expected that in 2023 I'll get to experience many of the things he did. Look at the same view, breathe the same air, step on the same stones. I'd like to take you with me. Stratford Upon Avon, 2023. Our journey begins with a train ride with rain-stained windows and rolling hills. We travel deep into the English Midlands in search of a medieval 16th century market town. It's a journey to the past, and you can feel the history by looking at these quaint buildings that are still standing from Tudor times. Even more recent architecture is built in this style so that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. The buildings that show their true age are the ones that have an exposed wooden framework, with the rest of the space filled with brick or wattle or daub. The wood was typically timber, making for a big fire risk, which made life difficult in the winter, as we'll see later on. The houses have a second floor that leans slightly out. This is not only for extra space, important especially for large families, as living in close quarters and poor hygiene increased risk of disease, but it's also a structural device to slightly protect passerbys from the splash of emptying chamber pots. Usually it would be men, as it was considered polite for the gentlemen to walk on the outer side of the street. It's very easy to romanticize the past and see only the calm cleanliness and serenity of this village now. It would have been far messier during Shakespeare's time. Most families could afford to wash only once a year. There was no clean water, meaning everyone drank ale, even the children. Chamber pots would be emptied out into the streets. The plague would wipe out many lives. Rats scattered about and diseases were rife in the air. So, let's take a closer look and see for ourselves what Shakespeare's life was actually like, behind these pretty buildings, starting from childhood, transitioning to adulthood, and lastly his death. Let's enter his birthplace. As we go in, we can first see an exhibition that reminds us of his powerful legacy. We see works by artists from all around the globe, plates, paintings, statues of Shakespeare. There are also crafts dedicated to his works, like these beautiful plates depicting all his plays, and this wonderful porcelain statue of Titania and Bottom from Midsummer's Night's Dream. There are also objects from Shakespeare's daily life, cups and various jugs made out of pewter and ceramics, brass candlesticks because this would have been long before electricity, watering pots and glove-making tools as Shakespeare learned his father's craft. The exhibition also has the opportunity to try on Tudor clothes, so here's me enjoying myself. And there were also texts that Shakespeare would have studied while at school, as well as one of his folios, his first ever collection of work. Shakespeare's house itself is a typical Tudor-style building that has local oak from the Forest of Arden, near Mary Arden's cottage, and a facade made out of blue grey stones from Wilmcote. It's actually divided into two parts, one of which was used for glove-making. The main part of the house is where Shakespeare lived as a child. He later inherited the place, but would not actually live there, instead renting it to his sister. The house has a beautiful garden. The tour starts with the parlor. This would have been the room where guests would be received. You can see a comfortable fireplace and a bed. This would be the best bed, reserved for the guests only. At the time, most people just had some straw, so having a bed that is elevated off the floor and has these pillars, you could see here, would be a luxury. The bed was very small, as the Tudors would mostly be of a small height and build, not only because of malnutrition, but because of the toxic fumes. You can see that the pillows are set upright, and that would be because there was a superstition that the devil would kidnap you if you were lying down and sleeping, but if you were upright, then he wouldn't. In the parlor, they would play card games by the fireplace or tell stories, but only until 8 p.m., after which they would all go to bed. Not only because school started at the crack of dawn, but also because there was a law preventing fire after this time, as it was a huge risk because of the timber. People would go around inspecting chimneys, and if you were caught after 8 p.m., you would be fined. There are wall hangings, the middle-class equivalent of tapestry, not only to decorate, but to keep the room warm. And there are also stone floors that were all the rage back then. These are actually the original stones from Shakespeare's time, so I was quite literally walking in Shakespeare's footsteps, which was amazing. Now, hope for that in life, I guess. Then, past the parlor, there is the dining room, and you can see what a typical layout would look like. Everyone would be drinking AO, children would be drinking the more watered down version. Actually, because they were slightly drunk, they would stagger a bit, and that's how the word toddler came about, because of the toddling children. School was from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 days a week, but in between you had a 2-hour lunch break, so young Shakespeare would come home to dine with his family. The main meal would be at 11 o'clock, and his school was about 5 minutes away, so not very far. The next room was actually separated by an outdoor passage, not only to give a feeling of privacy, but also because this was the glove-making shop, so it needed a horse cart delivery to be able to go through. The windows are quite wide, as they would open up and be the storefront. Shakespeare apprenticed here with his father, as also shown by his references to glove-making tools in the play. Actually, the really fancy gloves were for men, and the less fancy ones were for women. Men wore a lot of lace to accentuate their doublets and also their wealth. You might notice that some of the gloves have really long fingers, and that's because Queen Elizabeth I had long fingers, so people would attempt to imitate her by wearing long gloves and stuffing cotton down the fingers to not look silly. Wonder if they didn't look silly. The glove workshop had some smells, and they all smelled really nice, that is until I found out what they were. Manure, urine, and leather. Very strange. Honestly, they had a lot of chemicals added to the point where you couldn't tell what they were at all. On the wall, these sacks displayed showed the different kinds of wallets that people used. They were called pockets, so thieves would cut the bottom of these sacks with a knife and the coins would fall out, and that's how the term pickpocket came about. So yeah, just a little bit of trivia for you. Now let's head upstairs for the second floor. I was really surprised by how small the second floor was. It was basically only the children's room, the parents' room, the apprentice's bed, and the birthing window. The birthing window is the window taken out of Shakespeare's birth room, and you could see many pilgrims had signed their name on it as a sign of deference to Shakespeare. Pilgrims, of course, being people who travel to a holy place. So yes, Shakespeare's place is pretty much holy for everyone with any interest in literature, and I will not accept any other statement. This is the bedroom where Shakespeare and his siblings were born, probably by the fireplace because this bed is the parents' bed, and young Will would have probably slept in this little bed. Not very much to say about this, honestly, other than the fact that there was little privacy between the children and the parents' bedroom. Not that it would have mattered because everyone was out working the entire day. The next part of the house, Shakespeare actually added a lot later. He made it into a pub called the Maidenhead. Later, they added Swan to the name for marketing purposes, so it was the Swan and Maidenhead. This cottage is quite small and humble, showing that Shakespeare had a pretty much normal childhood, very middle class, and he received the same education as other boys his age. So no, he didn't have any extra advantage. His greatness was indeed thrust upon him later on in life. I'd also like to express how grateful I am to Shakespeare's Birthplace for their warm tour guides who were so friendly and their lectures were fascinating. I also love that there were actually homages to Indian and Chinese writers within the Birthplace. It truly shows Shakespeare's influence for generations to come, while also not leaving his contemporaries without attention. This place is so lovely and definitely worth the visit. There's a lot more to see off camera, so I hope that this video will make you want to visit and see for yourself. This is my biggest aim, to spread my love of Shakespeare to others, so I hope you enjoyed the video. After the Birthplace, I grabbed a snack at Rory's Fudge and the Cornish Bakery, and no, this is not sponsored, but how I wish it was, because it was literally so delicious. Like, that was the best pie I tasted in the UK, and the lemon meringue fudge was heaven. And after that quick snack, I wandered around the town a little, marveling at the adorable shops, and also processing the childhood phase for my next big stop, Shakespeare's School, the journey into young adulthood and adulthood. This is actually a picture of what you first see when you walk into Shakespeare's School, and it may look unimpressive, but there's a secret hiding behind the screen, which we'll get to soon. But first, the history. So actually, the first floor of this building was used as the Guildhall and the Court of Record, which met here during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, and John Shakespeare, William's father, was the bailiff, which was a really important job. He had to rule over the trials, so William would have definitely seen him at work at some point. In 1553, the Guildhall became Stratford's town hall, so not only would everyone meet here for the trials, but in general to keep the town safe and orderly. Everyone viewed it as such an important job that they didn't even shut down during the plague, but they did during COVID though. The Guildhall also saw different Tudor group performances inside, as all plays had to be censored before being shown to the public. The reason the school was upstairs was thanks to the boy king's Edward's reforms, who said that all boys deserve a public and free education. I also wanted to highlight the role of the Reformation further because the Guildhall became became the borough, the official religion of Catholicism was swept away, and people were forced to accept it, even though many were Catholics for generations. The Guild Chapel became whitewashed. Here is the Guild Chapel. It had a lot of beautiful religious paintings on it and decorative windows, but as soon as the Reformation came, they had to get rid of these, so they put white paint all over them, causing the destruction of many of these works because it was really hard to get rid of the paint later on without taking the original work with the paint. The glass window you see was actually provided by the Americans. It says JFK on the bottom, so that is also not original. I have never seen a whitewashed church before, so this was such a fascinating experience. And once again, I was blown away by the hospitality and kindness of the locals, who as soon as they saw I was a tourist, told me to take as many pictures as I like. And they were so happy that young people were paying interest and told me all about the history. So I'm going to do a quick rundown. The chapel was probably constructed in the 13th century, but it was likely just for private members of the guild, not the public, and a part of it was also a hospital. In the 15th century, most of the decoration took place with red lead, vermilion, oil, and other paint applied, and the windows were made bigger and the chapel was also extended. In the 16th century, there's a lot that goes on in terms of religious change. First, Henry VIII creates the Church of England because of the divorce that he wants, and then he dies and Edward VI takes over, who's a strict Protestant, and he seizes the assets and remakes the guild hall as a council and establishes a school. After that, it's Queen Elizabeth I who demands the removal of all superstition, direct quote, from places of worship, and that's when John Shakespeare pays to have some of the paintings covered. In the 19th century, the wall paintings were rediscovered and the chapel was also rebuilt a little because it had started to fall apart and it was unsafe to be there. Plus, earlier in the 17th century, a vicar had literally allowed his children to play sports inside and there were animals there, and yeah, it was just a mess. Then, back to the present, in the 21st century, the paintings are now carefully conserved and the organ was newly replaced, which brings me back full circle to that screen that you first saw, because behind it is one of the original paintings. Can you see the apostle? So that was just a quick rundown of the history, and then we head upstairs to Shakespeare School, the second floor, and we see this big list of all the headmasters on the wall. Thomas Jenkins would have taught during Shakespeare's time, and in the corner, Shakespeare's writing desk. The magister, the teacher, had this huge chair, and all the children sit on the wooden benches, and the benches are actually split by age groups, so closer are the 7 and 8-year-olds, not much is expected from them. Then you get to the 9s and 10s who are expected to know some things, and then the older year groups. That's how the term sixth form came about, because like those year groups were called the sixth form, that were the really last final benches. Learning was supposed to be fun, so they would debate and discuss certain things and learn from each other, so the younger boys would ask the older boys for help. No one was forced to go to school, but they all came willingly because what they learned was very interesting. They mainly learned Latin and grammar, and everyone saw it as very important to be good citizens and people. They didn't have a lot of paper and books, so they didn't have exams and homework, but they were still tested. The punishment was actually a whip made out of birch sticks for discipline, so if you were late, you would get hit, but only during one day of the week. So for example, Tuesday. If that day was Tuesday, everyone would have Tuesday to look forward to. The desks are 300 years old and are so sturdy, and you can literally sit behind them and try to write with a quill. And if there are any young families, I highly recommend Shakespeare School, especially as it is very interactive and it's a lot of fun for the adults too. I got to practice my Latin and was praised for being a very smart 7-year-old because I was actually sitting on the 7-year-old bench. So props to that for the academic validation I got from the trip. After that, I walked around a bit and made my way to the Royal Shakespeare Company. I didn't have tickets to a performance, unfortunately, which was so sad, but I explored the gorgeous building and admired the costumes, and later on my friend actually saw The Tempest and he said it was incredible, so maybe if I get an opportunity to come back again, I will definitely make sure to see the play. Maybe not The Tempest, but Much Ado About Nothing is one of my favorite plays ever, so I would love to see that. Stratford Upon Avon has so many gorgeous scenic views, so I'll leave you to admire them for a moment before moving on to the final act of Shakespeare's life and this video. There are many speculations about the cause of Shakespeare's death, but the truth is we do not know much. Some say a prolonged illness, others a hungover. One of the greatest writers alive has died because of an unknown cause, and our human minds will not let it go because we refuse to let him go without a story. After all, he has given us so many. The burial was recorded in Stratford's parish as being the 25th of April, and the gravestone reads the 23rd of April. Shakespeare is buried inside the beautiful Holy Trinity Church, where visitors can come and pay their respects and light a candle for Shakespeare's soul, or spirit, or whatever you believe in. He lays buried along with his family, and the inscription reads, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear, to dig the dust and close it here. Blessed be the man that spares these tones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Shakespeare was scared of gravediggers, and so he has left us with that final inscription and a will he had made a month earlier to finalize his affairs, leaving the majority of his wealth to his children, and famously the second best bed to his wife. The second best bed being a symbol of their love, because after all, they wouldn't have used the first best bed. Shakespeare's life may be over, but his legacy lives powerfully on, and in the end he had lived vicariously and fully, with merriment and sadness, and had secured himself with an admired spot in history for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years to come. What more could one wish for? Thank you.